We have something special for you this morning before we get started into our new series. We have a couple people that we want to recognize this morning. And we have several people that want to recognize them along with us. So what I want to do this morning is, if you'll notice in your bulletin, there's a little description there. Miss Duella is retiring after 45 plus years in touching children's lives and influencing their lives. And Miss Sarah is getting married, I think, right? And so she's been here for 10, or she served in that ministry for 10 years. What an incredible legacy. And so what we want to do is take just a moment, and we want to honor them. So I want to ask Miss Duella and Miss Sarah if you guys will come up here and allow us to honor you this morning. We're so thankful for all the years and all the influence you've had on the kids. We were talking about how we could show you that appreciation. And we had several of them say, well, we've got to do something. With four of mine, she tolerated and she taught and she did all that. And so we want to thank both of you so much. But before I give you just a couple cards and just a couple of things from the church saying how much we appreciate it, we had a couple that represent all the kids, and they want to bring you something from them this morning. Thank you for all your years of service. How fitting God would have it that we begin our new series talking about service. What I want to do this morning is I want to set the perimeters, if I might, for a new series. What is your calling? And I want you to think about that for a second. And when we think of calling, what we normally think of, what particularly Baptists normally think of, is they think about the pastor being called into ministry. How many of you believe, sometimes I set you up, you know what I'm saying? I ask a question to get your attention. It's not what this is. This is a true Baptist voting moment, okay? That's all this is. Not setting you up. How many of you believe that God calls a pastor into vocational ministry? How many of you believe that? That he doesn't get to choose, God just calls him? Correct. I was drafted. I didn't choose this, all right? But I thank God for it. But here's the thing that most Christians don't understand is as much as God has a calling on my life for service to Him, so do you. Every believer, after they give their heart to the Lord, God places a calling on your life. You know, the reality is, Romans 8:28 tells us that God takes all things and works them out for the good of those that love Him. There were 21 years that I rebelled against God. 21 years that I didn't know God. I wish I could go back and change those 21 years. I wish that I could get those back. But God has given me insight into people that as adults give their heart to the Lord and they wonder, what now? Because at 21 years of age, I wasn't raised in church. And so a lot of the background that we are blessed to see Will and others input and put into those children's lives and the teachings, I didn't have that. And in a way, for me, it gives me a different perspective. Okay? It allows me to be able to see that many Christians are wondering what follows giving my heart to the Lord. As we look at this series, I want you to understand what it is about and what it is not about. Okay? Since I've been here twice, I have preached on spiritual gifts. And what I want to do is I've kind of been moving toward this point. What I believe is, I believe that most Christians, even in this church, are wondering, what is my call? You hear many times from a lot of preachers, including me, that God saved you for a purpose, that He has a purpose and a specific plan for your life. And we're always asking ourselves, a lot of Christians are asking themselves, why? What's God's plan for me? You know, if you've ever served on a nominating committee or any committee in a Baptist church, when it comes time to fill those roles, it can be one of the most frustrating things to do in a Baptist church. Every church I've served on, I just came from a church of 3,200 members, and one of the most strenuous and tense committees to serve on was the nominating committee. Because it doesn't matter how many people you put in the door, park out in the parking lot, you never seem to have enough. And one of the discussions that always goes around is, why are our people not more committed? I'm telling you, I've been in Baptist churches. The first church I pastored, when I went there was 60 people. The church I came to you from, there were 3,200 people. And the conversations are the same. Why can we never get our people to be committed? I think that's the wrong question. I believe that most people want to be used of God. I just don't think they know how to get from point A to point B. And that's what the purpose of this sermon series is about. It's understanding how God moves us from point A to point B. Now, as we look at, without a shadow of a doubt, spiritual gifts in this sermon series, I need you to understand a few things. Some of you may never have heard, unless you've heard the two I've preached here, a sermon on spiritual gifts. Some of you may have heard sermons on spiritual gifts in many different fashions. My goal here is not to correct someone else's belief or some other denomination's teaching on spiritual gifts. That is not my goal. My goal is to help you move down the road hand in hand with God the Father the way He desires and designed you. That's the goal of this series. And so I want us to begin this morning. If you have your Bible, I want you to turn to Romans chapter 12, verse 3 through 8. And we're going to begin something. I'm giving you a warning, okay? So my intent is never, ever to embarrass you, but I'll show you why. I'll talk to you why I'm going to do this in the sermon. Next week, we're going to start something that we've done a few times. We did when I first came, but we're going to begin it for the next 2 weeks. Or 2 months, rather. I'm going to challenge you to bring one of these right here. And we're going to stand, not today, next week, and we're going to read the scripture that we're studying together. I'll read, you'll follow, and have one of these. And I'll show you why as we get into the sermon. This morning, what I want to talk to you about is this. Understanding the calling God has on what? Not your life. That's right. Let's try that again. Y'all wait. Y'all voted, but you didn't follow with me there. Understanding the calling God has on. There we go. Much better. I knew you were awake. All right? So I want you to read with me here Romans chapter 12, verse 3 through 8. Let's read that together. For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment. And that's important. That is the premise for all spiritual gifts. You need to write somewhere in your margin of your Bible, that you're going to bring next week, humility. It's the key. Each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. That's really important there also, because in all the spiritual gifts passages, almost without exception, it's made very clear that God assigns spiritual gifts. For as in one body we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function. So we, through many, are one body in Christ, and individually members of one another, having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us. Let us use them, if prophecy in proportion to our faith, and if service in our serving, The one who teaches in his teaching, the one who exhorts in his exhortation, the one who contributes in generosity, the one who leads with zeal, and the one who does acts of mercy with cheerfulness. I want you to pray with me this morning, and I want you to begin by humbling your heart as we look at what God has to say to us about our calling this morning. Every person in here today that knows Jesus as your Savior, you have a calling on your life. And I believe God wants you to discover it through this series. Let's pray together. Father God, as we come this morning, God, we're grateful. We're so grateful, not only that you saved us, God, but you have a use and a purpose greater than our own for us. This morning, as we humble ourselves here to study your word, God, might you speak to our hearts. Might you ignite a flame in our hearts. God, I pray that right now we would come humbly, submitting ourselves, that you would empty us from the top of our heads to the soles of our feet of ourselves, that we would turn from anything that would distract us. God, you might fill us with your Holy Spirit afresh and anew today, and use us far beyond anything we could hope or imagine, for your honor, your glory. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. And what I want to do is I want to take what we have learned together as a body, and I'm going to combine that. And this, again, as I said already, this sermon today, what I know that you're looking for is you want me to begin to splice the verses. You want to know exactly what that passage or that gift and what it is and what it looks like and how it applies and how we see that. I need to set the perimeters. Biblically, set the perimeters for this study today. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to take what we've learned in the past together as a body and just draw biblical perimeters. And inside of this, as we learn about spiritual gifts, this is God's intent for us to know and to exercise as spiritual gifts. And so that's what we're going to do today. It's not going to be as specific as someone, but I believe it's going to be very helpful if you'll humble your heart. First thing is this. Every person that knows Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior has a spiritual gift. Every single one of us has been gifted by God. God has given us a spiritual gift. And here's the other thing that we learned as I read to you the text, I showed you where it was. God determines that, not us. Now that ought to take some pressure off of you. And that ought to relieve you. You need to understand that God has an ultimate plan for your life, and God is the one who gifts you, and God is the one who designs you, and He determines what your gift is. God placed you and I in the body, and He wants us to serve Him. Now, here's something that I need you to understand about spiritual gifts. There are a variety of spiritual gifts. But notice this. This is important. This goes with humility. They're all valuable in God's economy. Repeat that with me. All spiritual gifts are valuable in God's economy. That's going to be important as we go through this and you understanding this. Now, there are a lot of questions that come up about spiritual gifts. How many are there? How many do I have? Does everyone have some? We're going to look and answer those questions. Some we've already answered, some we've already touched on. The first thing that I want you to see this morning is this. Discovering my spiritual gift/gifts. Often, and I've done it in many different ways, often I'm asked, Pastor, I'd like to know my spiritual gifts. I've done it in a myriad of ways. They make these spiritual gift inventories. I've taken up massive amounts of time in the church to go through spiritual gift inventories. And here's what you understand. They're not inspired of God. Now, they're helpful, but they're not inspired of God. Let me just be real honest with you. Once you biblically understand spiritual gifts and how God gives them and what they're used for and how they look, the reality is this. I almost always, sometimes when we have new members come and we'll go and spend time with them, in about 3 to 5 minutes, almost always, I can tell you at least one of those person's spiritual gifts. And it's not because they're telling me. But once you understand spiritual gifts, biblical understanding of spiritual gifts, you will understand how they work. You will recognize them. And my point in that is this. As people have asked me all the time, how do I find my spiritual gifts? How do I help others find their spiritual gifts? Let's do these spiritual gift inventories. Those are not bad ideas. But you have to understand they're not inspired. They're really not God speaking to you. They are a tool that man has put together to try to help you understand spiritual gifts. And the reason I say that is, before I've had people take those tests, and it's like any kind of test. You've taken tests at work, personality profiles, and all that. If you understand it, you can cheat on it. You understand, right? And people sometimes, not everybody, some people take those tests and they really want to kind of get an understanding of their gifts. But you can almost also say, you can make those tests say what you want them to say. I've had people say, look, Pastor, I took this test. Look at my spiritual gift. And I'm thinking, wow, thank God. But you're not going to enjoy that part of service right there. Okay? And you'll understand this as we go through this series. It'll make more sense to you. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to take those spiritual gift inventories. I'm not opposed to it. They're good. But this is a better way of you understanding and looking for and helping others with their spiritual gifts. Now, a couple things about discovering your spiritual gifts. Here's some things that I want you to think about. All believers have spiritual gifts. All believers are called into Christian service. All Christians are commanded and gifted to service in a local church. I want you to look at chapter 12, verse 6 that we read already. Listen to what the Bible says, what Paul says here. He says, having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. If prophecy in proportion to faith, if service in serving, the ones who teach in teaching. And so as we look at that, we understand that God has a plan for all of us. He has a gift that He's given each and every single one of us. All Christians are gifted. Paul says it this way in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 6 and 7. And there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who empowers them all and everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. Here's the thing that Paul was trying to get the Corinthians to understand, and I need all of you to understand this. I'm going to be saying some of these main points throughout this sermon because I want you to get it. The Corinthians had this idea the gifts were just that. It'd be like today if I came and I said, here's a gift. You'd go, woo, look here, he gave me a gift. For me. It's kind of like when my wife gets M&Ms. She thinks they're only for her. You understand what I'm saying? Right? But it doesn't work that way in the church. God doesn't give you a gift for you. He gives you a gift for others, to use for others. And Paul was trying to get the Corinthians there in Corinth, in 1 Corinthians, he was trying to get them to understand that God gifted them for the whole body. Your gift benefits the whole body. Your gift builds up the whole body. There are two very obvious principles that we're going to discover as we study through the Bible and we look at spiritual gifts. Number one, there is no spectators in the body. There are no spectators in the body. Absolutely none. Now, unlike today, in today's world, in today's culture, we have these superheroes. And typically they all fit up here on this stage, and everyone thinks that they are super Christians, they're superheroes. Not so. That's the first thing you need to learn. And that's the first thing that Paul was trying to teach the Corinthians. Everyone in the body is gifted for service. The second obvious thing that you need to learn this morning about spiritual gifts is there are no superstars in the body of Christ. All members are part of the body. All members. You've ever lost an organ? You've ever lost a part of your body? You know the insurance, they'll they rate these, if it's an accident at work or so on and so forth. They may rate them as this one more important than the other, but I promise you, if you ever lost an organ or a part of your body or a limb, you don't rate them the same way the insurance companies does, do you? They're all important. Every part of the body of Christ is important. And I'm going to go ahead and say something that some people may not agree with, but check me out. Take me to task in your Bible study before you take me to task after service. Every part of the body is equally important and valuable. That means the nursery workers are just as important as the pastor. Okay? Those are two things that you have to learn. Here's the other thing that I need you to understand. All of us are saved to serve. Now, I'm going to share something with you, and I'm not being antagonistic, just want you to get the point. Look around. What's everybody doing this morning? Not a trick question. What are you doing right here this morning? Yeah, you're sitting in you. That's not a spiritual gift. It is. So, that rationally leads you to a deduction, doesn't it? This is great. This is not what it means to be a Christian. This year, you were gifted, and it wasn't to sit on your butt. I didn't say that. Somebody out there did. Take it up with them. I don't know who said that. But you're gifted to serve. And if this is the only part of Christianity that you know, you have there's a whole lot more to it. You've missed out on the best part of Christianity. Amen. Now, I'm not trying to be ugly. The reality is, I know for years that when I first got saved, I worked with churches in our convention, and that was their measure of success. Not how effective the church was, not how many people were led to the Lord, not how many people were discipled and grown in the church, but how many people came and sat their butt on a seat on Sunday, and that was their measure of spiritual maturity. It's not the Bible's measure of spiritual maturity, and there's so much more. There's so much more to knowing the Lord and serving the Lord. But here's what you need to understand. Here's the point. What you're doing now is not what you're gifted to do. And so what I want you to understand about that is, right there in verse 6, he says this in chapter 12. Listen to what he says. Having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. Every one of you are incredibly important to the kingdom of God. Your spiritual gift is incredibly important to the kingdom of God. All the members must work together in order to accomplish what God has saved us for and for the body to function. Now, there's 4 main passages about spiritual gifts in the Bible. There's 1 Corinthians 12, 8 through 10. 1 Corinthians 12, verses 28 through 29. One more in, Romans 12, 6 through 8. And then Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11 through 12. Now, the Bible does have other places that it talks about spiritual gifts, but these are 4 of the main ones. Now, here's the thing that I need you to understand. Here's a big one that some people don't understand. These lists that I gave you, they're not exhaustive. There are other places in the Bible and that the Bible is going to teach us about spiritual gifts. Okay? But these lists, what they were intended to do, they were intended only to represent the kinds of abilities and activities that you and I might call spiritual gifts. Okay? And here's something I need you to understand. Here's the truest biblical sense of understanding spiritual gifts. There is no value in trying to take these lists and combine them. And trying to make up a list, whether it's there 12 spiritual gifts or is there 16 spiritual gifts. You do understand that the creator and designer of the universe and of you and I, the one that made the eyeball, is so complex. It's far greater than that. His abilities, his intentions. What are you saying, Pastor? Are there more spiritual gifts outside of the... If we took all the lists and all these passages and made a list, there's more spiritual gifts? Exactly. If you learn that, it will help you. So I need you to stay with me, and I need you to think about what we're going to learn here. God is infinite. He's infinite in His creation, in His abilities. But here's the thing. Here's the perimeters. Every one of them was designed so that we would serve Him while serving others. And I want you to think about it. The first one, there's a list of gifts. We're not going to read it this morning. Did we put it on the screen in 1 Corinthians? Okay, we'll read it since we put it on the screen. The first one is in 1 Corinthians. And it's 1 Corinthians chapter 12, and it's actually verse 8 through 10. Let's go to, I think, 1 Corinthians 12, and we'll start in verse 7. Listen to what it says. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. For to one is given through the Spirit the utterance of wisdom, and to the other the utterance of knowledge, according to the same Spirit. To another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing by the same one and same Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another the ability to distinguish between spirits, to another various kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. All these are empowered by one and the same Spirit, same person, who apportions to each one individually as He wills. Here's the thing that Paul was trying to teach the Corinthians. Just like today, we have this in our mind that there's superstars in the church. The Corinthians had this idea there were superstars then too. And what they did is they took these sign gifts and they elevated them above what God had intended them to be elevated above. And these became the superstars. If you had these gifts, you were super spiritual superstars in the church. There's a problem with that. These visible gifts, what many call spirituals, what they did was they argued that these gifts were a sign of God's favor toward those that possess them. And then God goes on, or Paul goes on, and he talks about this second list. Listen to it over here in 1 Corinthians 12, 28 and 29. And God has appointed in the church first apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then miracles, then gifts of healing, helping, and administering various kinds of tongues. All apostles are all prophets, are all teachers, do all work miracles. Do you understand? Again, Paul is asking a hypothetical. He's asking, wait a minute, is everybody a teacher? Is everybody a superstar? And the point that Paul is trying to make is, no. That's not how the body works. Paul intentionally chose certain gifts, and he categorized them together, and what he was trying to do was show that in God's economy, all gifts are valuable, and there are no superstars. How could you be a superstar when God's the one who chose what gift you have? And the gift is not for you, the gift is for the body. So here he teaches us this, that leadership and these service gifts are equally valued. Right there, if you're looking for a passage, what I told you about, the people over in the nursery changing diapers are just as important as the pastor up here today. Now, we can argue about it all day long, but in the body, the way that God designed it. Now, in the corporate world, it doesn't work that way, does it? In the corporate world, the managers or the administrators, do they make the same as you guys out on the floor making product? I guess that's a no, huh? And I've seen a lot of churches get destroyed because of those that have the gift of administration and work in the corporate world, and they come into the church to use their gifts for the church, and they immediately begin to value themselves more than the people in the seats and more than the people over here in the nursery. And I've seen a lot of churches destroyed. We don't live in the corporate world. We're talking about the spiritual world. In God's economy, those that work with kids and those that are administrators on the nominating committee or the deacons, There is equally important one as the other. Didn't get an amen, oh me, you're thinking that through, or you don't know. I want you to think about that. Because here's the thing. Remember I said they're going to repeat some things over and over and over? We today need to evaluate ourselves and to see if we're a great organization or if we're spiritually operating. That's important. Because I've come across a lot of churches in my time, helping churches as a pastor and working for the state convention of North Carolina, that run like a top, and you couldn't find Jesus hid in the broom closet nowhere on the campus. And a lot of churches, and listen, I'll be the first to agree that a church does need to be run like a business because it is an organization and you want it to grow, but it can't be led by the flesh. It has to be led by the Spirit. Okay? If you don't understand that, come see me later and I'll be glad to explain it to you. But I've come across a lot of churches that are organized great. Run like a top. But the hand of God's not on them because they're not operating in the Spirit. They're operating in the flesh. As we come to this third list, here's what we see. You notice it isn't nearly as long. Now that's what I'm setting the perimeters here. Here in Romans chapter 12, this list isn't nearly as long as the one in Corinthians. Because Paul is giving more generalities and he's giving a wider view of gifts. He's much broader. And you see here, all gifts for service are spiritual gifts. Gifts for service, not just administration, not just leadership. And you look at the expected gifts, the one that we always think about, which is the preaching and the teaching and all of those, but they're joined. They're joined to exhortation. They're joined to giving and leading and showing mercy. Because here's where most preachers that I know of have failed. When they teach on spiritual gifts, they're not going to be as specific as you and I are as we go through this. Man, if you're going to answer your call, if you're going to live a Spirit-filled, fulfilled life after coming to know the Lord, you need to know what God's called you and gifted you to do, and you need to do it. Here's the thing. If you look at what Paul has done here, we don't want to do what most preachers do. They leave you in a fog, and they talk about spiritual gifts, and they're this mystery. We want to clear things up for them. Because I'm going to tell you something. If you go to a body of believers, and you use your spiritual gift in the Spirit, as God has called you, there's nothing, not your career, nothing more fulfilling in life. Nothing. What I know is, not always, but generally when people say, well, I ain't getting nothing out of that church, that's a good sign you don't understand your purpose in the church. Spiritual gifts are not about church. Listen. Again, I'm just teaching. Church is not about you coming to get. And I'll talk to this more in depth. But unless you rip out all these passages about the gifts, because all the gifts are about you giving, you serving. And if you come only to get, I promise, most miserable you will be in any church you go to. The only way to reach the potential and experience God's goodness is for you to use your spiritual gifts. So here's two things that we want to get out of this series. Number one, discover your spiritual gifts. And number two, to help you develop them. Now just because you're gifted, it doesn't mean you shouldn't seek training. Listen to Ephesians. Ephesians 4:11. Ephesians 4:11 and 12. Paul says this, and he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and the teachers to equip the saints for what? The work of the ministry. for the building up the body of Christ. I need you to understand something very clearly this morning. If we're to be a biblical church and you hire me or Josh to come and do the work of the church, God won't ever bless them. He won't ever bless them. It won't ever go well, and it never works out. If we come and help develop and grow and disciple other leaders who develop and grow and disciple other leaders, and you, the body, do the work, God will bless that. But I need you to understand something. If you hired me or Josh to come and do the work, you need to make other preparations. Now, that sounds rash. Sounds harsh. But I don't want to be at a church that's not blessed by God. And I promise you, you can't violate that principle right there. You can't violate it. I'm not saying you are. I'm teaching you. If you're like, you mean, did you say no to do nothing? That's not what I'm saying. I need you to understand we're beginning from the ground and we're working our way up on understanding gifts. But I just need to remind you, what are you doing now? You're not serving, you're sitting. This is me developing part of this scenario, if you want to know how that comes in. But if you will, seek your gift, get to know what your gift is, allow God to develop it in you, allow God to use you, you'll be amazed how much you'll get out of everything you do. Absolutely everything that God puts in your path to do. So here's the question everybody asks. Well, Pastor, how do I first discover my spiritual gifts? How do I develop my spiritual gifts? Pastor, how many gifts do I have? All those are valid questions. Now I'm going to give you some good guidelines in point 2 on how you start the journey of developing, or first discovering and then developing your spiritual gift. Okay? Here's the problem. I like lunch, but don't invite me out to lunch to tell you what your spiritual gift is, okay? This needs to be a process that you and God go through together. Okay? I don't have the gift of putting my hand on you and going, yes, you have the gift of whatever. But once you understand spiritual gifts in the biblical frame that God intended them, you'll be able to sit down with lunch with people and say, that's their spiritual gift. You'll be able to sit and say, listen, they need to go serve here. A lot of times Baptist churches just plug holes. And people get so frustrated because we put people that are not gifted in areas that they have no gifts for, and they're going to be frustrated, and everybody with them is going to be frustrated. How do we cure that? Discover your spiritual gift and allow God through us to develop. Number 2, instructions for spiritual gifts. Number 1, you must recognize and acknowledge it's from God. When and only when a person humbles themselves, when a person is saved and then they humble themselves, do they have the ability to discover and understand spiritual matters. Listen to me very closely. 1 Corinthians 2, 6 through 16. I'm not going to read through all of it. I haven't put it up here. But here's the thing I need you to understand. In 1 Corinthians, right there in that passage, jot this down somewhere. 1 Corinthians 2, verses 6 through 16. What you learn is people who aren't saved, they don't understand spiritual things. They can't understand how spiritual things work. I've sat and served with a lot of Baptist committees, with lost people that sit on those Baptist committees, and they just don't get it. They don't understand how spiritual things work. It's the same reason why you have a professor in a secular college who can open the Bible and teach some of the craziest stuff you've ever heard in your life. This is spiritual. Oh, it's factual, and it's reasonable. You don't have insight into it. The great thing is when you give your heart to Jesus, and the Bible says in 1 Corinthians 2, 6 through 16, that God opens your spiritually blind eyes, gives life to your spiritually dead soul. Then God can speak to your soul through the Word of God, but He don't speak to dead people. He speaks to spiritually reborn. Okay? And the same thing works after you get saved. God gives you spiritual sight, and then He begins to give you a desire to serve Him. there in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 12, what you see is this, with this new light, this new desire, now you have a true understanding of what's going on. Then you begin to understand that everything you have, your house, your car, your job, your life, your bank account, your talents, they all are truly gifts from God. Listen to what he says in 1 Corinthians 4:7. For who sees anything different in you? What do you have that you did not receive? If then you received it, why do you boast as if you did not receive it? See, it doesn't matter if God calls you on the platform, or if He calls you in the parking lot, or if He calls you to clean the bathrooms, or if He calls you to change diapers, or if He calls you to do bulletins. You got nothing to brag about. God uniquely designs you, places you in the body to serve. And that's important. But now here's a major thing that I need you to understand this morning. You say, Pastor, how do I find my spiritual gifts? All right? I've used this illustration, and I'm going to use it again. When I got saved, I didn't know what my next steps were. And I wandered around for about 9 months in one of the best churches I've ever known anything about, still is to today. And it was most frustrating, most defeating, most unfulfilling. To just come and sit because you're not what? You're not, right, you're not serving. At least you're all listening. You're not serving, you're sitting. If this is all you ever do in your Christian experience, you won't like this after a while. It doesn't matter what kind of dog and pony show I put on up here. You ain't going to like it. I used to put on dog and pony shows, and then I understood the Bible a little bit more and thought those spiritual people are coming for spiritual food. But here's the crux of it. Suppose God called me to ministry, and He did. And in the ministry, there's administration that's required. Wouldn't you expect me to go to school, read books, and learn some administrative skills? This is a yes, this is a no. You would. And so I began that journey. But here's the thing that I need you to understand also. It is our job, as we saw in Ephesians 4, 11, and 12, to help you discover your gifts, help you develop your gifts. But do you know whose primary responsibility it is to discover and develop your gifts? Also is you. You. It's equally your responsibility. During that time, I was in one of the greatest churches that I've ever been a part of. And it was most frustrating. And I'll never forget. Okay? You think you've got problems. There was about 1,200 at that time. And I've told you this story before. God bless Miss Linda Hooper. You hear Miss Linda? Thank you. God bless you. Toughest job in the church is filling people over there. Getting them to come take care of babies. We were in the greatest church I've ever served in at all. I was a new Christian. I was frustrated. Didn't know where to serve. Didn't know how to fit in. Didn't know what to do. And one day, after an hour and 10-minute sermon, people got saved. The preacher had locked the doors. And I was a new Christian. I was like, oh God, here comes the Kool-Aid. I was very concerned at that point. And what he did was, he said, listen, the nominating committee cannot find enough people to fill the nursery. And he said, I know how long I preached. This is the second or third service that day. He said, and nobody's going to go eat lunch until we get about 7 volunteers. You think I'm ugly, man. It was lunchtime and a half. And he locked the doors. And so I thought, dang, I'm hungry. I'll serve, I didn't serve anywhere. First place I ever served was the nursery. You think, well, you got 4 kids. Listen, this was pre-marriage, pre-kids, pre-everything. You understand what I'm saying? It was all new. I wasn't sure where to put the gloves or the diaper or any of this stuff. We don't even talk about power, where that went, all right? But I learned through that process. Of serving others. It was one of the most fulfilling things I ever did in the church. You say, was that your gift? No. But it was the process, the journey. What are you doing right now? You're never going to start the journey or to begin discovering your gifts by sinning. You got to get out of the seat. You got to go volunteer sometimes. You got to go look for places to serve. And so I did that. And it's incredible how God used that to begin my journey. You say, Pastor, did you know at that time that God was going to call you in ministry? Never. Was that preparation for the ministry? Because I'm not serving in the nursery over there. No, it wasn't preparation for the ministry. Probably preparation for 4 children. Well, probably God's whole scheme of things. But you have to take responsibility for your part to look and to seek God. So here's back to our list of criteria for understanding spiritual gifts. Number 1, all abilities are gifts from God. Number 2, once we realize step 1, then all gifts should be surrendered to God. I'm going to explain this to you probably as simply and easily as I know how. Preachers preach all the time about God empowering us. Preachers preach all the time about God enabling us. But here's where preachers go off the rails a lot of times. They don't explain to you how God empowers, how God enables you. I can tell you, without a shadow of a doubt, if you listen to this, when you leave here today, you'll know how God empowers you. You'll know how God enables you in every area of your Christian life. Can I tell you? Number 1, you need to humble yourself and surrender to Him. You hear me every Sunday when I give an invitation. Here's where I start out. Okay? You know, God's really put it up on my heart. I got about that much more sermon to preach. But I need to explain some things to you before we get into the rest of it. Every Sunday, when I give an invitation, I start for lost people. And I say, if you want to come to know Jesus, come surrender your heart. You say, what's that have to do with me as a believer? Knowing how to be empowered by God. How to have victory from God. Here's how it works. Number 1, until you surrender your heart to God, you can't be saved.
That's right.
Well, Pastor, what does the word surrender mean? You can pray all the prayers you want to pray. You can get them perfect. They don't save you. They don't. We sang all this theology. You say, he's a heretic. You sang this in your songs, this theology. Remember when it talked about submission to God? Blessed assurance. Go back and look at that old hymn we sang this morning. Perfect submission. He is mine. Well, then, Pastor, how do I get saved? What is salvation? So imagine this morning you're in a foxhole and you're surrounded by the enemy. And they say, put your hands up and surrender if you want to live. What do you do? Right hand key, and you're going, woo, woo, I surrender. What does that mean? You give all authority to them. The gospel is the simplest thing in the world. But the true gospel is, you're in a foxhole dying, and your sin's killing you, and you're at war with God. And God surrounds you. That's what's going on in your heart right now. If you want freedom from the foxhole and the danger you're in, you've got to surrender your life.
There you go.
That's how it works. You can pray those little prayers all you want to. So, well, I was sincere. I know you were. The white flag went up and you surrendered. You were sincere. If not, you're trying to deceive God again. You're trying to trick God again. You're trying to make a deal. I've heard people say, preacher, I got this. I made a deal with God. Really? You made a deal with God? How's that work? He's God. He's laid out the details. He doesn't change the contract.
That's right.
To get saved, you fill up the white flag. You surrender.
Amen.
And then often you'll hear me talk about Christian surrender, right? Say, well, what you mean there, preacher? Listen to what the Bible says in Colossians. This is how you live in power and grace and mercy. Often, after I give an invitation for lost people to get saved, then I speak to believers. And here's what I speak to believers. To live the Christian life. Here's the key. To live the Christian life with the empowerment of God and to have victory, you must surrender often and daily at least. Listen to what Paul said, Colossians 2:6. Therefore, by the way, you Bible scholars, you need to go back and figure out what the therefore is there. I'm going to tell you. Therefore, as you receive Christ, how did you receive Christ? Foxhole, surrounded, white flag. As you receive Christ Jesus the Lord, so walk in Him. What does walk mean in the Bible? Live. And so Paul says, hey, if you want to be victorious every day, if you want to live in the strength and the power and the victory of God Almighty, how did you receive Him? How did you get saved? How were you delivered? Foxhole, surrounded, white flag, surrender. You gave up authority to Him. You surrendered. You submitted. How do you walk daily with Him in power and victory? The only way you can do it is you daily, white flag, white flag. Say, where do you get that, preacher? Here's what I'm getting at. The purpose of this series is for you to find what God has for you. Because there's nothing we offer at Grace that tops what God has for you. But you're not going to find it doing what? What are you doing? You'll find it serving. But you remember I talked about the spiritual church, the non-spiritual church? If you've been around any length of time at Grace, you know that for the last 3 years we decided that we wanted to examine ourselves and see just how spiritual we were. Because the majority of churches in America, the way they're designed is you come and see what's in it for you. They're very narcissistic. And when we don't play the kind of music you like, you get mad, you go tell a deacon, or you get angry. Or if we don't do this and you don't like it, you get mad. But what we learned is we wanted to look at ourselves and make sure we were a spiritual church. Spiritual church is one that is not motivated by, what are you doing? They're motivated by serving others. And just like I told you, here's how it all comes together. Every Sunday I ask, maybe you need to come to this altar. People don't because they're thinking, well, if I go over there, preachers don't think I robbed the bank this week. What's the key for spirituality? Humility, surrender. Can I tell you one sure sign of spiritual church is that when the invitation comes, people are on the altar in their face. Now, I get it. I know that there are some churches and people that put on shows. But you say, Pastor, why would you say that? Why would you say that they need to be up here? Here's why I'm saying it. What are you doing now? I know you're sitting. Let's move beyond sitting, okay? We're worshiping, right? We're corporately worshiping. We're going to be a spiritual church and see God do some incredible things. And if our church is going to is going to see God open heaven and pour down power, then just like you're publicly, corporately worshiping, you need to come corporately, publicly, show humility on your face, on a regular basis.
Amen.
And so what I can tell you is, I can't tell you if the altar's filled every Sunday, that automatically makes us a spiritual church. But I can tell you, if it's empty most Sundays, that does make us a non-spiritual church. But when we humble ourselves and submit, put that white flag up, He rescues us. Would you bow your heads this morning? The altar is open. God puts it on your heart. I'd love to see every Sunday our leadership, those that love what God wants to do at Grace, make it a regular part of their Sunday worship to be on this altar. And so, if God's put it on your heart now, you wouldn't move the altar. But what I want to do right now is I want to talk to you this morning, those of you that are guests with us. Maybe you've been to Grace for years. Here's what I want to ask you. I want to ask you, have you ever in your life thrown up that white handkerchief and surrendered to God for salvation? Man, you might have religion, and religion is comforting to a point, but it's not powerful. It's not free. It doesn't bring life. Have you ever in your life just surrendered and said, God, here I am. I give you control. I humble myself. I submit to you, Father. Have you ever done that? I'm not talking about being baptized. I'm not talking about joining a particular denomination. I'm not even talking about praying the prayer that a preacher prayed. I'm asking you, have you ever talked to God the Father? Because He's listening. And said, Father, I'm coming to you. And I'm surrendering. I'm asking you to come into my heart and change me. Have you ever done that? If you have 100% feel certain that you have done that, there's no doubt in your mind that you surrendered to Jesus Christ for salvation. Nobody looking around. Would you raise your hand? Put it up, keep it up for me. And you're sure you've done that. All right, I want you to put your hand down. If you've never done that, right now's the time. Man, He's got you surrounded. That tug on your heart, that's Him. That's King Jesus. Amen. But He's not the enemy that you've made Him to be. Just the opposite. He desires to come into your heart and transform it. Not reform it, transform it. Not give you a list of rules and regulations, but bring true life and fulfillment. Like no job, no career, like no relationship, like no drug can ever do. It's lasting. Maybe you're here this morning and you say, preacher, I've done that before, but it's been a while since I've done it on a regular basis. And I've been walking in the flesh way more than I've been walking with the Lord lately. Great news. He's got you surrounded again. Amen. And this morning He wants you to throw up the white flag, embrace Him, and move on. So the altar is open this morning. As God touches your heart, if you haven't accepted Him and you want to come talk to me about that, you come on. If you have accepted Him, you know what I know? When I truly surrendered to the Lord, man, I couldn't wait to tell everybody, all of my old friends. I couldn't wait to tell everybody. We love to celebrate with you this morning. Whatever God is leading you to do, come, pray, talk to me, maybe join this church, maybe to follow Him in obedience, baptism, church membership, just to get on this altar. You do as God's leading you this morning. Father, into your hands we commit this time. Father, we thank you. We thank you, God, that there's true power in surrender. We thank you that there's true victory, God, in and through you all. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.